Alpha wanted Akira to aim at a distant pebble, way farther than anything he'd practiced on. Skeptical but determined, Akira took aim. To his surprise, the rifle hit the pebble dead on. Alpha explained it was all thanks to the way she customized his suit's operating system, just like she had with his terminal. With a bit of pride, she added that she could now help him correct his aim. Akira, amazed, couldn't help but wonder out loud if there was anything she couldn't do. But then a thought hit him. Does this mean he can skip target practice now? Alpha shut that idea down quickly, reminding him that he might need to fight without the suit one day, and her help isn't foolproof everywhere. Now that Alpha had full control over his powered suit, she wanted to show Akira just how much more she could do for him. Akira, excited by this new potential, tested it out. In the next scene, he's zooming across the terrain like a human rocket. Alpha, controlling his suit, was moving his legs at lightning speed. But Akira wasn't exactly thrilled with this turbo mode, desperately wanting to stop. Panting as he collapsed onto the ground, Alpha proudly noted that now he could outrun an entire horde of monsters. Akira, still gasping for air, thought about how he'd probably fall apart before escaping in one piece, but Alpha reassured him it was better than dying. She laughed, but Akira wasn't sure if she was joking. She promised not to use that function unless it was absolutely necessary. Akira hoped she really meant that. Next up was hand-to-hand combat training, with none other than Alpha as his sparring partner. Confused, Akira asked how that would even work since Alpha couldn't physically touch him. Alpha calmly told him to take a swing at her. He did, and somehow hit her. Well, sort of. She explained she simulated the impact by locking the joints in his suit, just enough to make the training realistic. Then, in true Alpha fashion, she changed her attire and invited Akira to come at her with his best shot. He took the offer and charged in, but Alpha effortlessly dodged his attacks, almost as if she was toying with him. All the while, she calmly coached him on what to do next. But after one solid punch, Akira left himself completely exposed. Alpha seized the moment, sweeping his leg and flipping him flat onto his back. She explained how she tweaked the suit to make his movements smoother and reduce his chances of making mistakes. Now, all Akira had to do was train his body to respond the right way. They continued sparring, punching, dodging, until Akira made a huge blunder. Alpha, ever the opportunist, used it to hammer his head with a foot slam that would have crushed his skull, if it wasn't just an augmented projection of himself. As their training continued into the night, Akira lay sprawled on the ground, surrounded by the corpses of his dead augmented clones. Alpha called it a day, while Akira stared up at the sky, exhausted but alive, mostly. Panting heavily, Akira asked Alpha why he'd been getting flashes of strange feelings lately, almost like déjà vu. Alpha explained it was probably his mind trying to keep up with the suit's advanced systems, but she advised him to hold on to that feeling. It might help later. Too exhausted to even twitch a muscle, Akira resigned himself to the situation. But no worries, Alpha took over, controlling the suit to walk him home. All Akira had to do was focus on his training. In a last-ditch effort, Akira begged her to go easy on him next time. Fast forward a few days, and now that Akira had gotten a solid grip on his suit, Alpha signed him up for his first gig at the hunter's office. His mission? A wasteland patrol. The job was straightforward: cull monsters around Kageyama. It was the ideal starting point for newbie hunters like him. The pay wasn't bad either. He'd get bonuses for each monster he killed, and even if he didn't manage to take any down, he'd still receive a base paycheck. Not too shabby for an entry-level hunter. At the meeting place, Akira and the other hunters lined up to scan their IDs. Afterward, they would board trucks with their assigned numbers, and missing their ride meant missing the job for the day. When it was Akira's turn, he scanned in and was directed to truck number 14. Strangely, Alpha didn't seem surprised at all by the assignment. Akira asked Alpha what she meant by the truck number having baggage, but she brushed it off casually, saying it was nothing important. As Akira stepped into the truck, he could feel the weight of dozens of hunters' eyes on him. The stares were intense, and it felt like he was being judged. Clutching his rifle a little tighter, the tension in the air was palpable. Out of nowhere, Alpha, always up to something, changed her outfit to a bikini and casually pointed out that a seat was free for him. Confused, Akira asked why on earth she changed clothes. Alpha coolly responded that it was to add a little touch and color to his view. Before he could even react, she shifted into a bunny costume, asking how it looked. Annoyed, Akira told her to knock it off and switch back to normal. In truth, though, the tension he felt earlier had pretty much evaporated thanks to her antics. As Akira moved closer to his seat, a nearby man muttered something about his unlucky day and questioned why he had been stuck in a daycare on wheels. Just then, a kid slammed his hands down and stood up, defiantly saying that age didn't matter in hunting, it was all about skill. The arrogant man, full of himself, smirked and asked what the kid's hunter rank was. The boy, clearly not one to back down, shouted, 19, which immediately shut the man up. Akira, still unsure, asked Alpha how impressive rank 19 was. Alpha explained that it was above average, considering the typical rank for this patrol was around 15. But the man, refusing to be humbled, mocked the kid, calling him a Drunkam brat, and suggesting his rank was only because of his background. Alpha explained that Drunkam was one of the largest hunter syndicates in the area. The man went on, accusing the kid of only having fancy gear because of his connections, saying that specs don't translate into skill. This infuriated the kid, who shot back, calling the man the real deadweight. He argued that the man had no right to be upset about patrolling with younger hunters and should just see it as an opportunity to get more kills if he was actually any good. At that moment, a girl named Yumina stepped in. Without missing a beat, she clocked her own teammate, knocking him flat on the floor, to everyone's shock. She picked him up and warned him not to pick fights with other hunters, especially because they are kids. Katsuya, the arrogant hunter, still grumbled that he wasn't going to let anyone talk down to him. Yumina, undeterred, told him if he wanted respect, he should prove his worth on the field. After all, real tough guys have thick skin. This silenced Katsuya, who sulked as he sat down, pouting. With a sigh, Yumina applied a patch to Katsuya's cheek, and he, still annoyed, told her that if she was going to patch him up anyway, maybe she shouldn't have hit him in the first place. Yumina's words didn't seem to calm Katsuya down, so with no other option, she knocked him out. Irie, another girl sitting nearby, commented that loudmouths like him would just be eating their dust soon enough, so he should learn to hold it in. It was a fair point, but the arrogant man, Katsuya, only grew more irritated, unable to swallow his pride. Then, a new voice broke through the tension. A man approached, apologizing for the ruckus. He introduced himself as Shikarabe from Druncam and explained he'd be overseeing the rookies, so they shouldn't worry about being held back. He assured everyone that their performance wouldn't disappoint. This immediately got the attention of the other hunters, and even the arrogant man got silenced. The murmurs around the truck turned cautious as they sized up Shikarabe, clearly someone they couldn't afford to mess with. With that, the patrol began, and the team rolled out. Monsters soon came into view, and the shooting commenced. Unlucky for Akira, the arrogant man sits next to him, still muttering complaints. The other side's getting all the luck, Katsuya grumbled, then shouted in Akira's ear, telling him he should go join his buddies. Akira replied he wasn't with them, but Katsuya wasn't buying it, pointing out Akira's fancy power suit. Akira explained that he'd scraped by, cutting back on everything just to afford it. But before he could finish, something in Akira's expression changed. His eyes darkened as he mentioned he hadn't soaked in a proper tub for ages, and he was out here just so he could afford a room with a bath again. That cold stare actually unsettled the arrogant man, who quickly apologized for lumping him in with the younger hunters. Meanwhile, the kid from earlier was showing off, taking down monsters and getting praised by two girls for his skill. This, of course, irritated the arrogant man even more. He muttered that the rookies were getting full of themselves. Just then, he spotted a monster in the distance. But it was too far to hit. He noticed Akira was also using an rifle and sarcastically praised the weapon. Then, in a mock gesture of goodwill, he offered to let Akira take the first shot, knowing full well he didn't expect him to make it from that distance. Akira, however, had a plan. He asked Alpha for help, and with her support, he aimed at the monster even as the truck was moving. Akira took the shot. Headshot. The monster went down instantly. The arrogant man stood there, speechless, then awkwardly praised Akira for the impossible hit. Even Katsuya, the arrogant man's rival, noticed the kill and was equally shocked. He figured Akira had just gotten lucky, but at that range, it didn't seem possible. Their first patrol wrapped up, and as the clock hit 1800 hours, payments started rolling in. Akira scanned his ID and was pleasantly surprised with the results. Alpha explained that his base pay was 5,000 orum, but with only one kill under his belt, the bonus wouldn't be much. Akira's mood dropped. That wasn't enough to cover the cost of a room with a bathtub. Sensing his disappointment, Alpha reassured him that he had another patrol in the morning and 4 more in the afternoon. It should be enough by the end of the day. Just then, a familiar voice called out to him. It was Elena. She greeted Akira, mentioning how long it had been since they last met. Akira greeted her back, and Elena complimented his new suit, saying it looked good on him. She was in a hurry, though, and after a brief chat, she suggested they catch up at Shizuka's store sometime. Akira watched as she left, and memories of their time together flashed in his mind. He silently thanked her but felt a pang of pain. Alpha, noticing the shift in his mood, asked what was on his mind. Akira brushed it off, refocusing on his next patrol. As he scanned his ID, he was assigned his next truck, and to his surprise, it was number 14 again. Alpha mentioned it might be destiny, but Akira only grew more confused. He asked why she kept bringing up the number 14. Alpha casually replied that it's just seen as a bit unlucky, meaning Akira might have some rotten luck, which she readily agreed with. As the patrol kicked off, there was no shortage of monsters this time, a good thing for Akira, who was now optimistic about affording that elusive room with a bath. But Alpha quickly reminded him not to get too comfortable. There were still more patrols to run that afternoon. If he wanted more than one night in luxury, he'd have to work hard. Akira joked that at least the troublemakers weren't on board, making the number 14 feel less cursed. But then, for the next patrol, he got truck 14 again, leaving him speechless. He wondered aloud if they were just reusing the number. Alpha reassured him that they probably were, though even she sounded skeptical. Noticing they had some time before the next run, Alpha suggested Akira take a nap while he could, and he gladly followed her advice. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Elena and Sarah were apologizing for being late, meeting up with Katsuya and his group. Elena teased that Katsuya seemed a little too hyped up, which embarrassed him. Shikarabe, who was overseeing the rookies, chimed in, saying Katsuya was their responsibility now. But to everyone's surprise, Elena casually mentioned they were actually canceling, which shocked the group. Shikarabe was not happy, it was too late for cancellations and he demanded a solid reason. Elena calmly explained that they had received another offer, one they were prioritizing. Shikarabe was incredulous, pressing her on why they'd pick another job over Druncams. With a smirk, Elena revealed that the job came from the ELGC. Shikarabe was stunned. Elena explained that the ELGC wanted them to patrol near the city. While the route was dangerous, the fact that the ELGC itself issued the request made it stand out. Shikarabe was still doubtful, asking if they were really sure about this. Elena confirmed, noting it was strange since the city usually handled such jobs, but this was a formal offer through the Hunter office. Unless Druncam wants to negotiate with the ELGC for them. Shikarabe sighed, knowing it was a lost cause. He raised his hands and told them not to ask for the impossible, agreeing to inform his bosses. Still, what's going on for the ELGC to ask for this job? Even Elena doesn't have a clue. She just tells Shikarabe to let Druncam know they did the right thing by canceling. In person, of course. They leave, leaving Shikarabe deep in thought. Why would the ELGC hire Elena and Sarah? He's on their level, so it doesn't add up. Something's off. If only he wasn't stuck babysitting rookies, he could be looking into that job himself. He understands that training is important, but the rookies' gear comes out of their own pockets, and they're stuck doing low-paying gigs just to get experience. He can only hope the higher-ups will consider that once in a while. Meanwhile, Elena and Sarah are on the move. Sarah asks what exactly they need to do on this job. Elena did some digging and found out that hunters in nearby ruins received similar offers. If the ELGC is hiring hunters at their level, they might want every available one back in the city. But she still can't figure out why. They can only hope it's a precaution, but they need to be ready for anything. Cut to Akira, who is jolted awake by Alpha. In front of him stands a man, staring intently at him. Is this Akira's Prince Charming? The man informs Akira he was about to boot him out if he slept through the start of his patrol. But, surprisingly, Akira woke up just in time. Looks like he's got one heck of an alarm clock. Akira mentions it's top of the line, which earns him a sharp rebuke from Alpha, who's less than thrilled about being compared to an alarm clock. Akira quickly apologizes, but Alpha is already pouting. The man then orders everyone to move out and warns that anyone starting trouble will be kicked out and marked absent. And so, another, normal, day begins. As the truck continued its patrol, Akira noticed something odd. There were no monsters in sight. Alpha confirmed his suspicion, and the hunters around him started murmuring about their bad luck. But it wasn't just luck. The truck's scanners should have picked up something by now. Something was definitely off. Suddenly, the truck screeched to a halt. The man in charge climbed the ladder and relayed the news. Their patrol was officially over, marked as completed. The reason? A massive horde of monsters was advancing from the ruins of Kuzuhara town, headed straight for the city. The city's defense force was already mobilizing, and emergency orders were issued. Every available hand, including theirs, was needed for backup. He explained the situation clearly. They'd take a vote. If most of them agreed, they'd rush to the nearest distress call. If not, they'd head back to the city. They had 6 minutes to decide. Immediately, nervous chatter spread through the group. Taking on a horde big enough to warrant the city's defense force, they'd be signing their death warrants. Akira, listening to the conversations, felt the tension rise. Alpha assumed Akira would vote to head back to the city, and he wasn't about to argue. No one in their right mind would volunteer for this kind of job. Then, a loud argument broke out. Shikarabe and Katsuya were going at it. Katsuya was dead set on taking the emergency job, citing Druncam's policy to take on such missions to boost their reputation. But Shikarabe shot back, saying that policy only applied when they stood a chance of surviving. He made it clear that he wasn't part of Katsuya's team, and he wasn't going along with this madness. Time was up. The announcer called for hands. Only one went up, Katsuya's. The room was silent as everyone stared at him, either in disappointment or indifference. The decision was made. They'd head back to the city. The announcer reminded Katsuya that if he was serious about taking the job, he'd better get out and run after the horde. Katsuya cursed under his breath, frustrated. He wanted to help because it was the same job that Elena and Sarah had taken. Hearing that, Akira felt a jolt of surprise. Katsuya's team tried reasoning with him, but the young hotshot was set on rushing off to play hero. The announcer's sarcastic suggestion to run must have stuck, because Katsuya was already getting ready to leave on foot. But just as he was about to step out, Yumina called out to him. He stopped, ready for a confrontation. What no one expected was the gun Yumina aimed directly at him. The air grew thick with tension. Even Katsuya looked taken aback. Katsuya asked if she was serious. Yumina, with a calm but firm smile, told him she absolutely was. She explained that while she admired his heroic nature, how he loved saving people and how his hard work always paid off in those moments of triumph, she wasn't about to let him throw his life away. If he insisted on taking the risk, she'd go with him. But if he tried trading his life for someone else's, she wouldn't hesitate to shoot him in the leg to stop him. Yumina's words hung in the air like a warning bell. Everyone, including Katsuya, realized that this wasn't just about heroics, it was about survival. If Katsuya understood correctly, he should keep his hands away from the edge of the truck. He could only glare at Yumina, feeling the intensity of the situation. Irie squeezed his hand and shook her head, silently pleading with him. With a resigned sigh, Katsuya pulled his hand back from the edge. Yumina said he was free to resent her for forcing him to stay, but Katsuya shook his head, admitting he wouldn't. He realized he hadn't been thinking clearly. If he had, he would have seen the risks. Even if they did go, they would have only been a burden. In his typical heroic fashion, he thanked Irie and Yumina for stopping him from making a mistake. Shikarabe then chimed in, saying Katsuya should be thanking those girls. If Yumina hadn't intervened, Shikarabe would have had to, and he wasn't kind enough to aim for just Katsuya's legs. He added that someone needed to rein in their problem child, who thought he was invincible. Shikarabe's words drew murmurs of agreement from the crowd. It was clear they were unimpressed with Katsuya's antics. The focus of the group shifted as they glanced down at the truck. Katsuya followed their gaze and saw Akira on a motorcycle with the man who had announced earlier. Akira was there. What was going on? To understand the situation, let's rewind a few minutes. When Akira heard that Elena and Sarah were in danger, he didn't hesitate. He jumped off the truck, with Alpha warning him about the danger and asking if he was sure about this decision. Akira knew the risks, but he wasn't going to back down. Alpha reminded him that he might not find Elena and Sarah or that they might not be in any real danger. Even if he tried, his efforts might barely make a dent in the horde. But Akira was determined. If he couldn't make a difference, at least he'd know he tried. He didn't want to be left wondering if he could have done something. With his eyes blazing with determination, Akira was ready to go, even if it seemed like a lost cause. Alpha sighed at his resolve. The man from earlier noticed Akira's determination and asked if he was really taking the emergency job. He jokingly suggested that Akira should walk there, but Akira replied seriously that he would run. The man clarified that walking was just a figure of speech, but Akira insisted that running was faster, especially in his suit. The man, clearly amused, laughed heartily and smacked the door as he laughed. Akira, unfazed, just watched. The man then asked if Akira could drive a motorcycle. Alpha confirmed that it wasn't a problem, so Akira said he was good to go. The man handed over the motorcycle and signed him up for the emergency job, leaving the rest of the truck's occupants in disbelief at Akira's boldness. He seemed almost reckless. The man explained that the motorcycle was an advance payment and urged Akira to get moving. He cheered Akira on to be daring, comparing true hunting to gambling big. Most gamblers quit before hitting it big, so Akira should seize the moment and take the risk. As Katsuya watched Akira leave, the scene shifted to the ruins. A massive horde of monsters charged toward the city, and hunters working the emergency job were doing their best to hold them back, awaiting reinforcements. One of them shouted to keep firing and not let the monsters get close. Meanwhile, Alpha updated Akira on his new ride. The motorbike was small and collapsible but built to handle the wasteland's rough terrain. Akira had gotten quite a deal. If it's as impressive as it seems, that advanced payment might cost Akira more than he anticipated. As Akira drove, he spotted monsters charging toward him. Alpha informed him that she would be in control of his suit from now on and reminded him of their melee training, as this situation would be similar. Akira took note as he approached the horde. Alpha warned him that she would push the suit to its limits to handle so many monsters effectively. She was straightforward. His body would take a beating. If he wanted to back out, now was his chance. Otherwise, he needed to brace himself. Akira assured Alpha he was ready. His resolve was firm, which reassured her. She gave him the go-ahead. As Akira drove toward the monsters, he fired his weapon with precision, his aim corrected by Alpha's support. It felt like she was almost controlling his body, which amazed him. Alpha was pleased that he appreciated her exceptional support. Akira's job was simply to keep up with her guidance, and it seemed he was managing well. After clearing a group of monsters, Akira continued to drive forward, then skidded to a stop on his motorcycle. He surveyed the approaching horde from a safe distance. The bike allowed him to maintain his distance, making the task easier compared to his past encounters with Katsuragi. The monsters were coming from farther east, and all he needed to do was reach the distress call up ahead. As he moved and fired his rifle, just think about how challenging this was. Like writing an essay with one hand while drawing with the other. Precision and accuracy were crucial. Meanwhile, the truck from earlier kept moving, with hunters aboard continuing to fire. However, their situation turned grim when they noticed their bullets bouncing off the monsters. A black figure emerged from the smoke, drawing closer to the tank. Suddenly, the truck exploded, and the culprits behind the destruction were revealed. Tanks. That's right, AFC King Tank. The truck from earlier came to a halt, and the hunters on board quickly disembarked to start shooting. One of them grumbled that they better be paid well for this job, while another said they would be if the scanners kept track of their kills, assuming they made it out alive. He then wondered where their backup was, but even his buddy had no clue. The tanks had wiped out their office contact, so they could only hope they had done their job before meeting their end. Suddenly, the monsters in front of them were eliminated, and they thought it might be the backup they were waiting for. Alpha estimated that only 10 hunters were still in combat and that there had been 25 casualties. She noted that Elena and Sarah were still missing and asked Akira what their next move should be. Akira didn't grasp what Alpha was getting at and simply said they needed to do whatever they could. Alpha wasn't expecting this response. She instructed him to clear the area before meeting with the patrol so they could strike the monsters from both sides. As Akira drove forward, shooting at the horde while keeping his distance, the other hunters watched in disappointment, seeing him alone. However, his buddy reassured them that he was likely the vanguard and urged them to keep shooting. Upon closer inspection, the hunters saw that the biker was just a kid. They joked that maybe he was a young-looking cyborg. The man thanked Akira and asked if he was their backup. Akira confirmed he had taken the emergency job. The man then requested some meds, as some of them were badly injured. Akira handed over the high-end medicine he had, though the man hesitated. Despite asking for help, he felt uneasy accepting such costly supplies. Akira interrupted, saying they could discuss it later. He had given the medicine because he couldn't stand by and let them die. The man thanked him and asked about their current situation. Alpha explained that their truck was too damaged to move, so they had to stand by until help arrived. Akira then asked what he needed to do to complete his job. Alpha clarified that his objective was to defend the city, meaning his job wouldn't end until the threat was neutralized. Then, to their shock, hostiles were detected at their 2 o'clock. The tanks from earlier had returned, fully resupplied. Akira asked what those things were, and Alpha identified them as cannon insects. She suspected that a surviving arms plant had built them. Akira wondered why a factory would give them bug legs. Alpha was uncertain, guessing either an AI had malfunctioned or it was simply bored and built them for fun. Just for fun, Akira thought. The cannon insects weren't just for show, their firepower was akin to that of a tank. With the insects' cannons in position, the hunters couldn't hit them from their current spot. It seemed the insects had learned from their previous encounter. The insects lifted their bodies sideways and slammed their feet into the ground. As soon as their feet touched, they fired. It was like a war thunder event. With such firepower, even America would want that AI. Amid the explosions, Alpha asked Akira if he was considering fleeing. Akira firmly said he wouldn't, not until he was the last one standing. Alpha smiled, pleased with his resolve. She advised him to take recovery capsules now while he still could. Akira said he would go in close and attack the insects and asked them to cover him. The man wondered if he'd be okay alone. Akira took some capsules and stated that splitting their attacks was the only way forward. He then drove off. The man smiled, thinking if a kid was brave enough to take on those cannon insects, what were they doing? He rallied his team to divide and conquer and to use their grenades without reservation. The clash of the century was about to begin, tanks versus hunters. Let the battle commence. As Akira charged toward the insect tanks, which continued to fire at him, he asked Alpha if they would be okay despite the missed shots. Alpha explained that the enemies had extremely low accuracy, suspecting errors in their blueprints. But their poor performance made their shots unpredictable, making it hard to foresee where exactly their shells would land. Even Alpha's superb calculations couldn't guarantee Akira's safety. His only hope was luck. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on his side. Alpha joked that he should pray she could handle his bad luck. And considering Akira chose to be here, he couldn't really blame luck for his predicament. Akira quipped that if it wasn't about luck, he might as well blame Alpha's so-called support if he got hit. Alpha wasn't thrilled by his comment. If that's how he saw it, she had no choice but to increase her support to keep him safe. When Akira asked what she meant, his motorbike suddenly accelerated at breakneck speed. The wind pressure was so intense it hurt him, even with the meds. But dying was not an option. He gritted his teeth and bore with it. With Alpha controlling his movements, he skillfully dodged the attacks. Alpha then informed him that his rifle couldn't directly damage the cannon insects. His shots merely bounced off their thick armor. If his rifle couldn't penetrate their defenses, what was the plan? Alpha instructed him to target the drones responsible for reloading the cannon insects. Akira looked around, spotting what seemed more like walking magazines than drones. If Akira could take out those reloaders, the insect cannons would run out of ammo and become sitting ducks. Once that happened, the other hunters could finish them off. Dodging shots from the tanks, Akira maneuvered expertly, then spotted the drones walking towards the tanks to reload them. He drove toward the drones, shot them before they could reload, and blew up the insect cannons. The other hunters watched in awe, their jaws dropping at Akira's actions. Who was this kid? They wondered. As Akira continued to shoot and destroy the drones, progress was being made, and the other hunters were pulling their weight. At this rate, victory seemed possible, but then Alpha detected something and warned Akira immediately. It appeared the insects had received reinforcements. As Akira approached, a massive insect cannon, resembling a mountain, appeared. Was this a railgun? Here we go again. Alpha asked one last time if he was sure he didn't want to flee. But Akira stood his ground, his resolve unshaken. With his determination, Alpha had no choice but to face the new threat. Akira asked why Alpha was putting his rifle away. She explained that shooting it would be futile against such a giant. With no other options, Akira refused to escape. Alpha, grinning, asked if he had changed his mind. Akira insisted he wouldn't run, so she wouldn't skimp on her support. As they approached the gigantic monster, numerous drones were nearby, ready to reload it at any moment. One of the drones jumped into a hole, and the monster fired, shaking the earth and exploding the entire area. With a weapon like that, how could they possibly win? Alpha explained that they would get close and improvise. It seemed Akira wasn't keen on more details about the second part. As he drove through the fog, he closed his eyes and, upon reopening them, saw the towering tank, like fighting a walking building. Alpha noted that, since it lacked a full turret, it had to turn to aim. This was Akira's chance to drive right up to it. But how could they take it down? Akira's shots simply bounced off, even up close. Alpha suggested using the drones, the walking cannon shells. Understanding now, Akira realized that shooting the drones would set off a chain reaction. But Alpha had a different plan. She instructed him to prepare. Using the motorbike, Alpha flipped a shell into the air, With Alpha controlling his movements, Akira kicked the shell and jumped toward it. To his surprise, the cannon was pointed directly at him. As the shell fell, Alpha told him to kick. Akira complied, kicking with all his might and sending the shell into the tube. As the shell entered, it exploded while Akira was still midair. He landed back on his motorbike just in time. With his rifle in hand, he drove and shot at the remaining shells around the cannon, triggering a chain reaction that exploded all around the giant insect cannon, ultimately destroying it. The explosion left everyone stunned, filling the area with thick smoke. As promised, they had taken down the enormous cannon, but when Alpha asked if Akira wanted a detailed explanation of how they did it, he wasn't interested. Despite their victory, Akira knew he needed more training and better gear before he tackled another fight like that. Even though he had defeated the behemoth, he was far from being strong enough to complete his job for Alpha. At this rate, who knew when he'd be ready? As Akira approached his fellow hunters, he noticed them cheering and shouting for him. It was a nice boost for his popularity. Time passed, and Alpha reminded Akira to replace his suit's energy pack or it would become a dead weight. Akira fumbled with his meds and, shaking the container, mentioned he needed more. He also needed to buy more ammo when he got back. He then inquired about his payment. Alpha reassured him that he would be paid, so he shouldn't worry about that. Akira hoped so because he was itching for a bath. As the rescue team arrived, they were finally saved. The man from earlier approached Akira, acknowledging his reckless bravery. He admitted he had thought Akira was all talk, but it seemed his judgment was getting rusty. Though annoyed, Akira was grateful for the life-saving motorbike and thanked him. The man informed him that his job was marked as complete, so he was free to go. Akira asked if it was over, and the man confirmed that the defense force had eliminated the horde attacking the city. Heading back to his motorbike to go home, the man advised Akira to drive safely and not to crash. If he planned to die, he should go out with a bang, being crazy, reckless, and rash. With a sigh, Akira drove off. One of the man's crew approached him, reporting that they had finished transferring the battle data, but something didn't add up. He explained it might be difficult to believe, like a hunter charging a swarm of monsters alone or soloing a massive robot in melee combat. They guessed it was just an instrumentation failure, but the man burst out laughing and suggested interviewing the hunters to cross-check. He changed the order, wanting to talk to them himself, and instructed not to delete the data unless he said so, and to send him a copy. Grinning, he already knew that Akira had gone wild to the point where his records looked bugged. Laughing and approaching the hunters, he declared he liked Akira because he was the liveliest hunter he'd seen in ages. As they drove towards the city, Alpha reflected on how Akira, who rescued Elena and Sarah, strangers he felt depressed when they thanked him, had acted so irrationally. Despite the emergency job, he risked his life fighting in a place they probably wouldn't have been. His actions made no sense. What principle could explain his behavior? Alpha was determined to find out, to predict, guide, and control Akira's actions, to manipulate his thoughts and deeds, all for her own ends. Inside the city, injured hunters were promptly guided to the medical center for treatment. Alpha then told Akira she had some bad news. His pay deposit was delayed, so he couldn't afford a room with a bath tonight. She was sure he'd be paid by tomorrow, and he would just have to hold on for one more day. This news depressed Akira the most. He had been looking forward to a bath after such a long fight. On top of that, Alpha asked what he planned to do with his motorbike, given he couldn't afford a hotel with a garage either. Someone might steal it if he left it parked. Was he planning to sleep on it? Akira thought about it and decided he'd stash it at Cheryl's. At Cheryl's base, a commotion erupted, waking her up. Clearly annoyed, she was even more so when she heard Akira was there. However, her irritation melted away as soon as she saw him. She greeted Akira with a smile, thanking him for waiting and inviting him inside. Akira apologized for arriving so late and asked if she could watch his bike for him. Cheryl agreed happily, assuring him that the bike would be safe. She then offered him a coffee, but Akira declined, saying he was exhausted and only wanted to head back to his hotel. It was a shame for Cheryl, who hadn't seen him for so long. Akira promised he'd drop by again soon. Cheryl bade him farewell and said she'd be waiting for his next visit. At his hotel, Akira enjoyed a good night's sleep on a comfy bed. The next morning, Akira was overjoyed to see his payment of 12 million orum. Alpha explained that it included his base pay for the emergency job, bonuses for the 2 waves of monsters he fought off, the hunters he rescued, and the value of the medicine he had given them. Subtracting the cost of the motorcycle he received as an advance, that was the total. Still, 12 million was a lot. Akira was thrilled that all his near-death experiences had paid off. Alpha calmly advised him to spend some of his earnings on upgrades, which shocked Akira once again. Alpha told him not to be surprised every time, but how could he not be? If 12 million was considered pocket change, what would she call a lot of money? Alpha said even 10 billion would be pocket change if paid in orum. Curious, he asked what Alpha meant. She explained that orum was corporate currency and couldn't buy everything. Eventually, he'd understand just how little it was worth. Akira nodded while chewing his meal. At Cartridge Freak, Shizuka greeted him, asking how he liked the powered suit. Akira said it was better than he had expected and mentioned he wanted to buy another. He asked Shizuka for a recommendation for a gun that was effective against machines. Shizuka had a range of options depending on Akira's budget and asked how much he could spend. Akira mentioned up to 10 million orum, which left Shizuka speechless. He had only had his suit for a few days, so she was curious about how he suddenly became so wealthy. Akira tried to explain, but Shizuka walked out from behind the counter, making him more nervous. He described his recent fight against a swarm of monsters and how the unexpected payout had stunned him. Shizuka got closer and criticized his recklessness, but Akira preferred to call it desperation to stay alive. He whispered a sheepish yes when asked if he was reckless. It was amusing to see someone with a death stare acting like a puppy. Shizuka then dragged Akira inside, eager to inspect under his suit. She hoped he wasn't covered in bandages. Akira argued he was fine, but Shizuka insisted that if he was, he wouldn't mind showing her. She hurriedly stripped him of his suit. As Shizuka took it off, she noticed his numerous scars. She had almost forgotten how many he had when she measured him for the suit. Relieved not to find any major injuries, she hugged Akira and asked him to promise not to take unnecessary risks. Akira agreed, though he felt a bit like he was being scolded by a concerned parent. Back to business, Shizuka recommended a CWH, anti-material rifle with standard armor-piercing cartridges for dealing with armored robots. It also required proprietary cartridges, making it pricey but highly effective, capable of taking down major threats or even piercing an armored target with a single shot. Just imagining a rifle powerful enough to take down a tank was impressive. It was practically a tank itself. Shizuka, smiling, added a warning not to go looking for those kinds of monsters. Akira assured her he wouldn't be seeking them out. Back at his hotel, he excitedly headed to his room with a bath. He asked if he could take the day off. Alpha confirmed he could, as she wouldn't make him work today. Thrilled, Akira got ready for his bath. However, Alpha reminded him to finish his errands first. He hadn't told Cheryl how long he would leave the motorcycle with her, and she might expect him back soon. He also still owed Shijima the rest of his settlement, and delaying too long could jeopardize the truce. Alpha suggested he handle these tasks before relaxing. Despite the bath being so close, Akira had no choice but to address these matters to avoid bigger problems. The clanking of his equipment drew attention as he balanced everything, though his suit made it easier to carry. Alpha told him to get used to it while he could. At Cheryl's base, people were murmuring outside her room. Inside, Cheryl was hugging Akira tightly, asking him to let go. Cheryl wanted to make up for lost time from yesterday. Akira, wanting to get to the point, asked if they could address the reason for his visit. Cheryl, glowing, asked what he needed. Akira found her insistence on hugging him a bit excessive, but they settled down. He slid the remaining payment for Shijima across to her. Cheryl asked if he was sure, as they hadn't pressed him for it yet. Akira reassured her that the amount was pocket change compared to what he had earned the day before. He realized that while he used to fret over 200 grand, 500 grand now seemed trivial. Was this because of his 12 million Orum payout? Cheryl took the money, promising to pay Shijima. Akira then asked if he could use Cheryl's place as a garage for his bike. Cheryl agreed to watch it as long as he needed. With business wrapped up, Akira asked if Cheryl needed anything else. She declined, smiling like a cat. Now that their transaction was complete, she set up a chair next to him and went in for another hug. Cheryl suggested removing his suit since it was hard for her to hug him through it. Akira was reluctant, as his suit gave him considerable power. However, if he kept it on, Cheryl would hug him longer, explaining that it wouldn't feel as satisfying otherwise. Reluctantly, Akira took off his suit to let Cheryl hug him until she was content. Alpha observed but remained silent. When Akira asked why she didn't say anything, Alpha responded that it was nothing. Akira then told Cheryl it was enough. Still planned on enjoying a long, relaxing bath later. Surprised, Cheryl mentioned that they had a tub at her base. She then seduced Akira with an offer to help him wash all sorts of hard-to-reach places. This shift from embarrassment to excitement made Akira zip up his suit quickly, saying he'd use the room with a bath that he had already paid for. He wanted to relax at his hotel. Cheryl understood but felt a bit let down since Akira's reluctance indicated he didn't fully trust her yet. She resolved to work harder to earn his trust. As they finished their conversation, 3 armored trucks parked in front of Cheryl's base. The kids inside saw this as bad news. The men who emerged were none other than Shijima and his crew. Ario burst through Cheryl's door, slamming it open, his voice shaky as he announced that Shijima had arrived, and he wasn't alone. Cheryl remained calm, standing gracefully as she said she would be right there. A room was prepared for the meeting, and the person serving coffee was trembling so much, it was a wonder they didn't spill it all over the floor. Cheryl apologized for not being able to offer cake with the coffee, blaming tight finances. Shijima waved it off, unfazed. Cheryl then inquired what brought him to her base. Shijima explained that it was just a courtesy call since they hadn't really spoken since their last meeting. Cheryl, casually sipping her coffee, replied that Akira was alive and well. Shijima seemed genuinely pleased to hear that. Akira questioned what they are really talking about. Apparently, Shijima wanted to check if Akira was still kicking, and Cheryl responded in kind. With so many hunters dead from the attack the other day, Shijima needed to know if Akira was one of them. If he was gone, Shijima probably had plans to snatch up Cheryl's gang. But Cheryl's calm comment put an end to that idea. Akira, listening in, found this level of negotiations more of a headache than it was worth. Alpha, however, explained that this was just one of the burdens of leadership. Not Akira's problem, though. Cheryl slid the owed money toward Shijima, saying it should be enough to settle the debt. He took it with a satisfied nod. With the debt settled, Shijima hoped they could maintain friendly relations moving forward. But Shijima wasn't blind. He noticed Akira's upgraded gear, particularly his powered suit and the shiny new CWH rifle. It got him thinking. Should he pat himself on the back for not starting a fight last time or regret not taking Akira out before he got all decked out? Then again, there was no point crying over spilled milk. The bigger question that gnawed at Shijima was, why was Cheryl so confident now? She should have been rattled, maybe even desperate. Instead, she was cooler than a winter breeze. What had changed? Back to business, Shijima wanted to discuss their future, asking if now was a good time or if they should reschedule. Seeing that Shijima was finally taking her seriously, Cheryl reassured him that now was fine. And so, they moved on to the territory dispute that had caused their previous conflict. But before things got too deep, Akira, obviously bored, stood up and announced that this was going to take a while, so he was heading out. Cheryl reassured him that she had everything under control, but Ario panicked, questioning how she could let Akira leave while Shijima was still there. Shijima, amused, welcomed the idea of continuing the conversation without an outsider present, implying that this was a leaders-only discussion, even if their gangs were hardly equal. With that said, Akira excused himself, telling Cheryl to call him if she needed anything. Cheryl thanked him, expressing her appreciation, and the meeting resumed. After some time, the meeting concluded peacefully, and Shijima and his crew left without causing trouble. Ario, collapsing onto the floor in exhaustion, nervously asked if Cheryl was sure about giving up half their turf. Cheryl calmly explained that they'd only sold off what they couldn't manage anyway, and they received a cool million orum for it. Besides, the land would have been more of a liability than an asset for them. The deal went smoothly for Shijima, but it only deepened his concern about Cheryl's sudden composure. It worried him more than Akira ever did. Whatever had changed in her, he feared he might have poked a sleeping beast. Meanwhile, Akira was back at his hotel, finally enjoying a nice, long bath. Alpha, though, couldn't help but interrupt his moment of bliss with an important update. Akira had burned through a lot of his medicine stash from the ruins, and now his supply was dangerously low. She warned him that he couldn't just brute force his way through problems anymore. Akira, ever the optimist, suggested they just head back to the ruins for more meds. There had to be some left, right, but Alpha shut that idea down quickly. The recent attack had shaken up the monster population so badly that even with her help, Akira probably wouldn't survive a trip there. With that plan off the table, Akira promised to be more careful. Alpha simply reminded him to do his best, reassuring him that she had his back. Over at the Druncam Hunter Syndicate's HQ, gunfire echoed through the halls from the training facility. Inside, Katsuya was busy practicing his aim, even though it was still early in the morning. But this wasn't just a regular training session. He was reliving the battlefield, where he fought alongside other hunters against a monster horde. Despite his efforts, he hadn't been able to save anyone, and that failure weighed heavily on him. He trained non-stop, pushing himself past his limits. Yumina urged him to take a break, and Aina added that this wasn't training anymore, it was just self-punishment. Katsuya, teeth clenched, let his rifle drop. The fact that he couldn't save them kept eating away at him, making him question his strength. Aina tried to comfort him, assuring him that he had done his best and that the situation had just been too dangerous. Yumina echoed her words, reminding him that it wasn't his fault. Still, the loss of 3 comrades, Druncam kids he'd trained with, had hit him hard. It was no surprise Katsuya was taking it so personally, but Yumina and Aina knew he'd need more than comforting words to shake this off. Yumina told Katsuya they needed to get stronger, and she'd help him train to protect everyone next time. For now, though, she advised him to rest. Aina chimed in, offering her help too. Katsuya, still wearing a look of despair, didn't argue as the girls gently walked him back to his room. Meanwhile, Shikarabe stormed into Arabe's office, clearly irritated. Arabe, dripping with sarcasm, commented on his good mood, and asked what was wrong. Shikarabe grumbled that it was because Arabe had him babysitting those rookies. Apologizing but not really, Arabe acknowledged Shikarabe's dislike for the kids but pointed out that they'd performed well, even under tough conditions. After that close brush with death, they were no longer just loudmouthed rookies in his eyes. Shikarabe wasn't buying it. He reminded Arabe that 3 people died just to get the rest of the team out alive. In his view, they still had a long way to go. Even if Katsuya became 10 times stronger, he'd just find himself in 10 times more dangerous situations and likely get more teammates killed. Arabe asked if Shikarabe thought Katsuya wasn't cut out to be a hunter. Shikarabe admitted that Katsuya had more raw talent than either of them. He was, in Shikarabe's words, a diamond in the rough. Arabe called it high praise, but Shikarabe clarified that he was keeping personal feelings out of it to avoid clouding his judgment. That was precisely why Arabe wanted Shikarabe to continue training them. He asked if Shikarabe could endure it a little longer. Shikarabe, though, didn't want the responsibility. Sure, he called Katsuya a diamond, but he wasn't interested in polishing it to make him shine. Arabe teased that it would be easier to find a replacement if Shikarabe stopped complaining so much. Shikarabe sarcastically suggested Elena and Sarah take over babysitting duties, especially since Druncam was already trying to recruit them. While talks were ongoing, the chances seemed low. Shikarabe then proposed making it an official job and paying Elena and Sarah extra to train the kids. After all, Arabe was an executive, he could throw his weight around. But Arabe brushed off the suggestion, saying accounting wouldn't be happy about it. This only made Shikarabe more furious. He wished the number crunchers had any clue what life was like on the ground. Meanwhile, Elena and Sarah were at Shizuka's shop, stocking up on supplies, 3 times their usual amount. Shizuka, noticing how much they were buying, commented that they must be preparing for something big. She also remarked that they both looked exhausted and asked if the job had been that rough. Her gaze briefly lingered on Sarah's chest, to which Sarah dryly responded that appearances don't always match ability. Elena agreed, adding that the job was worth the pay, even if they didn't want them grumbling about it. Elena then vented a bit, explaining that some of the monsters they faced had camouflage, which made scouting a nightmare. At one point, tanks and mechs were running wild, things got dicey fast. Their conversation was interrupted by a news report. The broadcast claimed that ELGC had identified the recent monster assault on Kageyama City as an act of terrorism, perpetrated by nationalist groups. Multiple organizations had already claimed responsibility, calling it a justified reprisal for ELGC's crimes, and a holy war against the corporation's wrongful control of the East. Sarah speculated that this might explain why ELGC had hired them for the job. But Elena wasn't convinced. She doubted Kageyama City had enough influence to attract nationalist attention on its own. Besides, luring monsters out of Kuzuhara would have been costly for the nationalists in terms of casualties. The attack would have serious repercussions, even for other nationalist factions. Trusting that report seemed risky. Elena then turned to Shizuka, asking for her thoughts. Shizuka considered it for a moment and said that while the story made sense, parts of it didn't sit quite right with her. That's all she could say for sure. Speculating wouldn't get them anywhere. Meanwhile, deep in the Kuzuhara ruins, towering, interconnected buildings stretched like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. A voice echoed through the desolate structure, addressing someone named Mr. Yanagisawa. The speaker questioned whether what they had done was really a good idea. He reassured that he already cleared it with the ELGC. Even so, they had essentially sicked a pack of monsters on a city, and now the news was pinning it on nationalist groups. If they were unlucky, they might get lumped in with them. Yanagisawa calmly explained that the decoys who had died luring out the monsters were, in fact, nationalists from the Alpha Party. That's why the news got it right. Decoys would likely be satisfied. They'd died for their cause. The other voice, still skeptical, found it hard to believe that Yanagisawa had such deep connections with the Alpha Party. Sure, he knew Yanagisawa had ties, but this was on another level. Yanagisawa's associate voiced his concerns, mentioning that while having the right info makes it easy to infiltrate, the recent attack, even though it failed, was still a capital crime. He wasn't sure what Yanagisawa was after but didn't want to be left out to dry. Yanagisawa reassured him, saying the deal he made had them covered, and that the city defense force had been idle for too long. Wealthy citizens inside the city walls were complaining about the budget, so someone had to remind them that safety has a price. When asked why they didn't just use monsters from another ruin, Yanagisawa explained that the outskirts of Kuzuhara had already been explored. The city's leadership was eager to start expeditions deeper into the ruins, and this monster culling was a perfect opportunity. It served multiple interests. The city's leadership wanted to push deeper into Kuzuhara, the defense force wanted to justify its budget, the Alpha Party aimed to boost its influence by attacking a city. The hunters wanted the fame and fortune that came with such expeditions. Everyone got what they wanted, except, of course, for the dead monsters. It was a win-win, at least from Yanagisawa's perspective. The associate, however, was curious about Yanagisawa's personal stake in all of this. Did he need something deep in the Kuzuhara ruins? What was he really after? Yanagisawa, with a smirk, avoided the question, cryptically stating that his actions were for the advancement of the human race. Ending the conversation there, Yanagisawa moved on with his plans. Meanwhile, Akira was practicing his shooting skills in the ruins, casually asking Alpha if the emergency job had bumped his hunter rank to 17. Alpha confirmed it had, but also reminded him that rank 20 was necessary to rent a wasteland vehicle, which would allow him to hunt beyond Kuzuhara. For now, Alpha suggested upgrading his gear and recommended getting a scanner. When Akira asked what a scanner was, Alpha explained it's a device that gathers data to help him explore and detect threats, especially since her ability to scout is limited outside Kuzuhara. Akira groaned. Another expense. At Cartridge Freak, Shizuka apologized for not having scanners in stock, but Akira brushed it off, saying he was asking for too much. Their conversation was interrupted when Elena and Sarah entered the shop. Elena, with a friendly smile, said she was glad to see Akira well after hearing how rough things had been during the recent attack. Akira smiled back, relieved to see them too, and casually asked why Elena didn't wear a powered suit. Elena confirmed she didn't use one, explaining that while Sarah had nanomachine augments, she didn't need a suit. Akira was surprised, but before he could say much, Sarah teased Elena, pointing out that despite not having a powered suit, Elena was freakishly strong. Sarah joked about how Elena lugged around heavy equipment while still calling herself delicate. Elena fired back, mocking Sarah's ability to handle grenade launchers with one hand, calling her out on her own ridiculous strength. The banter escalated, with the two glaring at each other, leaving Akira awkwardly stuck in the middle. Sarah taunted that without her nanomachines, she'd be more delicate than Elena. Elena, not missing a beat, retorted that if that happened, Sarah would lose the chest she was so proud of. Shizuka, sensing the rising tension, stepped in to calm them down, warning them they were scaring poor Akira. Then, out of nowhere, Elena and Sarah dropped a bombshell, asking Akira which of them he thought was more delicate. Clearly nervous, Akira blurted out that while he didn't know about delicate, he thought Elena was slim and pretty. Elena, pleased with the compliment, thanked him. Not to be left out, Sarah demanded her answer. Akira hesitated, but eventually said she was pretty too, which made Sarah just as happy. Shizuka, not one to miss out on the fun, chimed in and asked what Akira thought of her. He quickly replied that she was super pretty, earning a satisfied nod from Shizuka. Then Alpha, with a touch of humor, joined the fray and asked Akira what he thought of her. Akira flatly said she was pretty, prompting Alpha to complain that he was always prickly with her. Akira shrugged and said it was because he knew she was just teasing him. Amid the light-hearted exchange, Shizuka suddenly remembered that Elena had a scanner gathering dust, one that hadn't suited her needs. She asked Elena if she could pass it on to Akira. Elena mentioned that it was from Senbei Electronics, so it was a reliable piece of equipment. She suggested a price of 2 million orum, and with Alpha's approval, Akira agreed to the deal. Later, inside the ruins, Alpha guided Akira as he practiced using the scanner. Akira commented that he had never ventured this far before and wondered what these other ruins would be like. Alpha reminded him that he wasn't rank 20 yet, so there was no need to worry. This ruin was relatively safe, and the monsters here were weak. Despite that, Akira felt a thrill of excitement at the thought of exploring new areas. As they arrived, Alpha cheerfully welcomed him to the Higuraka Residential District ruins.